thank you for joining me, and welcome to level 1 of your Level Up Your Brioche virtual cowl with me, Deanna Gutman, owner of Needles in the Hay. We're going to start this virtual knit along with Jared Flood's Skipp hat, which is your choice of either a single color or two color brioche hat, and that's going to be a great place to start. So before we get into casting on, I'm going to give you a few little pointers to mentally prepare yourself to dig into some brioche. So many of you may have been knitting for a while. You might be super experienced knitters. You might be more beginner knitters. But the thing you need to know about brioche is that it's not like other knitting techniques. So you'll be doing yourself a favor if you sort of park most of the knowledge that you have about knitting and try to view this as a brand new thing that you're trying to learn. So there are some things that are applicable, but you're just going to have to view your stitches and read your stitches a little bit differently with brioche. And brioche is a beautiful sort of rib stitch. It's considered a tuck stitch. It has amazing texture. It's completely reversible. It looks fantastic in various colors and color work. And it's been super popular lately because it works really well with a lot of those hand-dyed yarns. So when you're knitting brioche, it's alternating between knit and purl stitches and slip stitches with yarn over top. So whenever you're doing a slip stitch, you always add a little hat of a yarn over on each of those stitches. So always remember that, and then every time that you're working a stitch, either purl or knit, you're always going to be working it with that little hat that you created on the previous row. So take a look at the video. You might find that it'll be a little bit easier if you're having trouble to start by just casting on a little swatch. You can cast on an even number of stitches and just start the row by slipping a stitch. And you can have slip stitches on either end to give it a nice edge. And that might help you just wrap your head around the techniques a little bit. Because loft or Piri or whatever fingering weight yarn you're using is a little bit on the smaller side. For some people it might be helpful to pick a worsted weight yarn or a chunky yarn and just get the brioche techniques under their fingers. So this video assumes that you have purchased Jared Flood's Skipp pattern. I don't show the pattern in the video. I just kind of go along with some of the steps and help you with some of the items that I think might be a little bit tricky. So we're going to go through the cast on, and I've actually created a separate tutorial for that as well. We're going to learn how to do the setup row and how to do the brioche knit stitch, how to do the brioche purl, and also right leaning and left leaning double decreases for your crown shaping. So these are all the things we're going to learn in level 1, and so let's pick up our yarn and our needles and get started. Okay, we're going to get started with the rib cable cast on. So this pattern tells you to double up your yarn. So what I did is I have used from the beginning and the end of my ball because I did it as a center pull. So if you did it as a center pull, you can use from the front and the end. And if you did it as just a regular ball where the end is kind of trapped on the inside, then you can just measure out an additional length of yarn. So I show a little bit here the rib cable cast on, but I actually did a separate video which is like an extreme close-up that you can refer to if you're not familiar with this cast on. So it's kind of like a cousin to the regular cable cast on, except you alternate knit and purl. So you still go in between the first two stitches, and you do front to back for a knit stitch and back to front for a purl stitch. Okay, so I've cast on all the way around. Now I'm just going to check and make sure none of my stitches are twisted, that they're all nice and flat and facing in the same direction. So here you're just going to break that additional tail that you had for the doubled up cast on. So now we've just got one strand of yarn moving forward. And we're going to put on our beginning of the round marker and do our setup round. So we do the setup round by bringing the yarn into the front. We purl that first stitch, and the next stitch we keep our yarn in the front. So make sure it's in the front there. Make sure your yarn is nice and tight at the beginning of the round. And you slip that like so, and then you do a yarn over top of it to kind of make a little hat. Then you purl, keep your yarn in the front, slip the next stitch purlwise, and then yarn over top of that stitch to create a little hat. So for this round, your yarn is always going to be staying in the front because you're never doing a knit stitch or slipping anything purlwise. So we just went all the way around, so purl and yarn over. So the next thing we're going to do is the brioche knit. So to do that, you have your yarn in the front, slip that stitch, yarn over, and then you knit the next stitch together with its yarn over. So bring your yarn back to the front, slip that next stitch purlwise. Because your yarn is in the front, it's going to make an automatic yarn over when you go to knit the next stitch together. So bring your yarn back over to the front, slip purlwise, and then knit the next stitch together with its yarn over. So in brioche, the stitch that you're working, you're always working it together with a yarn over. So we did this close up just so you could get a really good look at how this is supposed to work. So this next round, you're still working with your main color. You're going to slip one yarn over and brioche knit all the way around. See, I've got my yarn in the front. We're going to knit those two together. Bring your yarn back over to the front, slip purlwise, and then knit the next stitch together with its yarn over. Yarn to the front, slip purlwise, and then knit that next stitch together with its yarn over. So we've gone all the way around doing our brioche knit. So if you're doing the 2-color version, now is when you're going to add that second color. And then this round we're going to work through the purl stitches. So for brioche purl, your yarn is in the front the entire way. So you're going to purl the purl stitch together with its yarn over, leave the yarn in the front, slip purlwise that knit stitch, yarn over to give it its hat, and then we're going to purl the next stitch together with its yarn over. See how the yarn just stays in front the entire time? So that's the way the purl row is actually a little bit easier than the knit row, because you don't have to do quite as much movement. Okay, so now that we know how to brioche purl, we're going to do that across the next row. So we purl, keep our yarn in the front, slip one yarn over, purl, yarn in the front the entire way. Now we're going to just alternate our brioche knit and brioche purl stitches, and then that's going to give us a brioche rib. So at this point you're just going to work brioche rib until it's time to get to the crown shaping. So now we're going to do the setup round for the crown decreases. So this is where we place our markers. So Jared has set this up so that there's kind of like columns that you decrease on either side of. So we're on a knit row. We're going to slip one yarn over, brioche knit, slip one yarn over, and then we add our marker. So follow your pattern, and then we're going to knit to the next placement. And one way you can know how many sort of brioche knit slip one yarn overs is how many columns you've got in your ribbing. So you can actually just count the columns. So if it says, for instance, to repeat it 13 times, you just count across the ribbing like so. And then that's how you read your stitches and make sure that you've got the placement correct. Okay, so now we're going to add our next little column here. Okay, so at this point you're just going to follow the instructions in your pattern, and you're going to get all of your markers placed in. And after you've got your markers in, you just have to do one row of brioche purls, slip one yarn over, and then you'll be set for the decreases. So we start with a right leaning double decrease. So what you do is you knit 2 stitches together. So the knit stitch as well as the purl. So we slip that off. Then we have to slip that stitch back to the left hand needle. So you're slipping it purlwise so that you're not readjusting the stitch. And then we slip the next stitch on the left hand needle over top. So that way you've decreased 2 stitches, and then you just slip that stitch back to your right hand needle so you're set to move on to the next stitch in your pattern. So that's the right leaning decrease. So after we work through our first slip yarn over, brioche knit, slip yarn over, we're going to add our first right leaning decrease. So you work those first 2 stitches together. Slip that stitch back to the left hand needle purlwise so you're not reorienting it. And then you slip the next stitch on the left hand needle over top, like so. And then we slide that stitch back to our right hand needle so we're in position to keep working. So now we're going to work across until 4 stitches before the next marker, which is where we're going to do our left leaning double decrease. So for left leaning, you slip the next 2 stitches to the right hand needle knitwise. So you do want to reorient those 2 stitches. So make sure you slip them knitwise. Then you're going to brioche knit the next stitch. Make sure that your yarn is in the front so you still catch that yarn over. And then we're going to slip the 2 stitches purlwise that we just moved to the right hand needle over top of the stitch we just brioche knit. And there you go, you've decreased 2 stitches and you're already ready to work your next stitch. Okay, so we're going to slip the next 2 stitches knitwise. Make sure our yarn's in the front and then brioche knit the next stitch. Then we're going to slip those 2 stitches back over top of this stitch that we just brioche knit. And that will decrease 2 stitches and we'll be leaning to the left. So at this point, you're just going to keep following your pattern to complete the crown decreases. And here's a close-up shot of my completed crown shaping. Okay, so once you're finished your crown shaping, all that's left to do is to thread your yarn onto a darning needle, and then you're going to pass it back through the remaining stitches 2 times. And I'll just warn you, loft is a little bit tricky when it comes to pulling on it. It tends to break. So do twist the yarn several times in the direction that it's spun. What happens is that's going to increase the tensile strength so that you'll be able to thread that through and give it a little tug so that you can close up that hole nice and snug. And then we end up with our finished skip hat. So this is my finished hat. I'd love to see your hats if you want to share them with us on Instagram, in the Facebook group for Needles in the Hay Virtual Knit Along. Please do. And thank you very much for joining me for this virtual knit along. You've just completed level 1 of leveling up your brioche, and I hope you'll join us for level 2, which is the windrow cowl by Bristle Ivy. Thanks so much.